This is a recorded meeting because after this meeting is finished, we're going to send this recording to the City of Franklin Planning Department, and they're going to post it on their website. So if you have friends or neighbors who are interested in seeing this presentation, there will be a link posted under neighborhood meetings on the city's website, and you can watch it from there. There are several ways that you can communicate through this meeting. One is to take yourself off mute. I'd like to ask that you wait until the end of the presentation to ask questions. We're going to give as much time as we need. We have a hard cutoff just before 6:30, so we have about an hour. But we also have the chat, the meeting chat available. So if you open up your chat, you want to type a question in, or you're afraid you're going to forget it and want to type it in before the end of the meeting, we'll circle back to it. My name is Greg Gamble. I'm a landscape architect and land planner with Gamble Design Collaborative. And this is a proposal to amend the Envision Franklin land use plan by Boyle. We're also supported on our team by Historical Concepts and Kimley Horn. This property is specific to, this proposal is specific to what's called the Harlin property. It's just at the end of Hillview Lane, just to the west of Columbia Pike. It's approximately 300 acres in size. It's currently in Williamson County, not annexed into the city of Franklin. The zoning on the property today is MGA 1, which is Municipal Growth Area 1, and would allow for 1 unit per acre. The current Envision Franklin policy on the property is development reserve. It's placed in a development reserve policy because the city wants to have better defined infrastructure in this area before development can proceed forward. Boyle is proposing, would like the Planning Commission to consider a policy of Village Green. Village Green is a brand new policy that was just introduced into Envision Franklin just a few months ago. It has not been, the design concept has not been used yet in the city of Franklin planning. It is a design concept that is intended to provide the ability to establish a wider variety of housing options while prioritizing the preservation of open space first and foremost. We start a plan with the Village Green process by first identifying desirable natural features in open space that would be preserved, and then developing in a small development footprint on the remaining area of land. The Village Green concept in Envision Franklin is established, again, first and foremost, to preserve the rural character. We've had a lot of discussion in Franklin with planning about what happens on those edges of Franklin as we're transitioning out toward Williamson County. This is an approach that has been introduced into the land use plan as a consideration to do just that. There's a requirement in Village Green to preserve 70% of the property as open space. You can see here in the example in Envision Franklin how there's existing farmland that's preserved. This would have a conservation easement or protected easement over it, preserving that open space. Other open space areas that might include nature trails or some park-like amenities. And then clustered within the open space would be maybe townhomes, small-scale multifamily, local neighborhood commercial type uses. In this example that's shown here in Envision Franklin. You can see here the intentional almost Main Street drive with 3-story townhomes, condominium flat buildings, on-street parking, sidewalks on both sides, curb and gutter in a small village-like development. Within the Village Green concept, there are multiple housing types that are supported as a part of the master plan, potentially. Those would include single-family homes. They would include a multiplex building, which is a building that looks like a single family house, but may have 3 or 4 homes in it, townhomes, and then small scale multifamily buildings, which would include, again, a building that looks like a single family house, but may have up to 12 smaller units inside of it. So typically in the form of stacked flats. So this offers the opportunity to provide a wider range of home prices, of affordability, mixture of homes that just provide access to housing in a different way. At Harlin, we're very focused on creating an authentic, real, quality village that not only celebrates the rural setting, not only preserves this open space in a very meaningful way with access not only for residents, but for the community to many of those open space areas, but focuses on a true village, a village that would resonate with a lot of the, I would almost say, small towns within Middle Tennessee. The site is located in immediate proximity of many of the city of Franklin's current services, including police and fire, elementary and middle schools. Right at the end of this year, or the first of this year, sorry, right around the first of this year, the city of Franklin voted to adopt new urban growth boundaries. The urban growth boundary from 2003 is shown here in green. The urban growth boundary of 2004 is shown here in purple. You can see in this area of the city of Franklin, they removed large areas of land from their urban growth boundaries. So this area that's in green here was previously planned for new growth in the city of Franklin, but now it has been reduced to the area inside of the purple. That changes the location or area of a future pump station for sewer. It would now be located here along the Harlin property and not out along Carter's Creek Pike. Y'all are familiar with South Hall. That's located right here, just south of Carter's Creek Pike. Once that was proposed and is now developed, the city said, you know, there's a very slim chance we would ever annex the South Hall development into the city of Franklin, and it made sense for them this year to remove that area from the urban growth boundary. When the city contemplates new development, infrastructure is first and foremost. The next few slides talk about some early information that we have pulled together regarding infrastructure. The process by which development would or could occur on this property would follow an Envision Franklin plan request to the Village Green concept. If that's supported by Planning Commission, then the developer would proceed forward with a development plan, a master plan for this property. That master plan for this property must include a traffic study. It must include a plan for connectivity. And that process has not started yet. We are just in the Envision Franklin portion of the planning process right now. Even though we have done some initial evaluation looking at the potential for road connections. So from the Harlin property, we know that Hillview Lane does dead end or stops here at kind of this main access to the property. We also know that there's a potential connection to Incinerator Road to the north, a potential connection to Lula Lane directly to the west, and to the south, a connection to Coleman Road. This evaluation of connectivity must be further defined before we move forward, or before Boyle moves forward with a development plan submitted to the city of Franklin. So there are probably a lot of questions about connectivity and what roads would be connected and how traffic would circulate through here. And we fully understand that. And that is a process and a step that is to come in the very near future. The blue line that you're seeing here is the alignment provided to us by TDOT for the future Mac Hatcher Parkway. This shows you potential connectivity before Mac Hatcher is constructed and then after Mac Hatcher is constructed. Here we have Hillview Lane, again shown here in yellow along the southern edge, bottom of the screen. There is currently a roadbed that's constructed to about this point right now with shadow green. We fully anticipate that that road would need to be connected to Hillview Lane with the development of the Harlin property. When Mac Hatcher is constructed, this intersection then of this road from shadow green to Hillview Lane would be an access. This would be a signalized intersection here on Mac Hatcher Parkway. The portion of Hillview Lane shown here in green that is at the bottom of the park, on the north side of the park, that would become pedestrian access only. Hillview Lane would stop at a cul-de-sac approximately here, and then this portion of Hillview Lane would then be pedestrian or bicycle only. Now that's according to TDOT's plans that they have, they're working on now. Sorry, not working on now. TDOT's initial plans for how Mac Hatcher would function in this area. There are no plans that I'm aware of TDOT moving forward on any plans for TDOT at the moment. Sorry, I'm having to let a few people in and it's distracted me. Regarding utility infrastructure, the blue line that you're seeing here north and south is HB&TS, and it would need to be extended through the Harlin property. There's already a water line through the property now, but this would need to be, the size of this water line would need to grow in order to accommodate new development. The existing water line is shown here in this dark blue color and goes from east to west. The new water line would be this lighter blue color and it would go north to south. The sewer pump station, likely to be located off of Lula Lane. This location is the base of it's the bottom of the drainage basin for this area. And that pump station would serve for any potential future sewer for this area. The orange line would then be a force main that would take the sewer back to a manhole approximately at the shadow green development. We have a requirement with an Envision Franklin amendment to provide a concept plan. This is a concept plan that we've provided that we'll be talking with the board, mayor, and aldermen of the Planning Commission about. This is likely to change. Concept plans, as you can imagine, are just that. They're concepts at this stage. In this development, you can see along the outer edges of the preserved open space, larger lots that would range anywhere from 3/4 of an acre to 1.5 acres in size. Within the development here, we have some smaller lot, single family homes. We have a small village center here that might have some neighborhood commercial that would include maybe a restaurant, a wine shop, a general store for sundries, coffee shop, maybe some artisan cottages, artisan maker spaces. This plan would include a high level of amenities that might include in addition to parking.
Thank you. Uh-oh, I can't hear it.
Put you on mute. Yeah, no problem. That's okay. Amenities that would include hospitality, maybe a small boutique hotel, post office, tennis courts and pickleballs, as well as opportunities for social clubs, and fitness center and swimming pool areas. But really the number one amenity is the preservation of open space. This shows you what 70% open space would look like preserved on the Harlin property, and you can see the small footprint of the village. We have some artistic renderings of what we think this village would look like, having a small chapel, small Main Street areas with some on-street parking and some specialty boutique shops down on the ground level. This shows you the experience of what the single-family street might look like, with grand front porches accessing out onto sidewalks on both sides of the street, on-street parking, tree-lined streets. This shows you an example of what some of the larger lots might look like when we start to get into the 1 and 2 acre lots. Of course, they would be spacious with grand front yards and backyards, but really larger, more estate homes in this location. This is a density comparison. I think it's very helpful. On the right, you see West Haven. And this is a figure ground study showing the density of West Haven. This is a figure ground study on the left side showing you the density of Leapers Fork and its village. And Harlin is kind of married somewhere in the middle. It's certainly not nearly as dense as West Haven, but a little bit more intense than what Leapers Fork is right now. With the Village Green request, we are requesting a special consideration. And that special consideration would be that a neighborhood village may consist of designated areas for commercial uses established in a Main Street form at significant intersecting streets within the neighborhood. Commercial areas are intended to be comprised of neighborhood scale uses as well as boutique uses that are complementary to the neighborhood. The neighborhood scale commercial is encouraged to utilize residential above the commercial to activate and support the retail environment. Small scale multifamily buildings and townhomes within the neighborhood village may be up to 3 stories in height. All proposed buildings will have the proposed heights indicated on the development plan prior to approval. Civic uses may also be appropriate in the neighborhood village. And again, that is relative to the church and or any community buildings that may be associated with the master plan in the future. Hospitality uses are appropriate within the village green if sized appropriately. And the building massing is in keeping with the location and design. The boutique hotel, including traditional hotel suites, rooms, and standalone cottages. Cottages are separate buildings that might have up to 4 suites per building are appropriate. The boutique hotel may also include accessory uses such as a cafe, restaurant, retail, meeting spaces, health and wellness, indoor and outdoor wedding venue, and other accessory uses. And lastly, the development should strive for dark sky compliance and should utilize low light levels rather than typical commercial light standards. This plan is proposed to be, this request for this Envision Franklin Plan Amendment is proposed to be filed with the City of Franklin on August the 12th. And would track forward to a joint conceptual workshop presentation at the City of Franklin on August the 22nd. That is an in-person meeting, and that is a formal presentation of our group to the City of Franklin Planning Commission and Board and Mayor and Alderman at the same time. It is not a voting meeting. It is just a meeting to get some feedback and input from those 2 bodies. If this does track forward, it would be on the Planning Commission agenda on September the 26th at 7 p.m. That is a public hearing, and the Planning Commission certainly gives opportunity for the community to ask questions, to make statements, and provide feedback on concerns that they may have. With that, we're going to turn it over to questions from the neighborhood. Adam Balish is with Boyle, and he's in the meeting with us as well. You can ask your question on the chat, or you can just simply take yourself off mute if you have a question. Rob, do you have a question?
I do have a question, Greg. I understood from our prior discussions that we've had on 2 other occasions that there was no plan or that adding the access road to the Mac Hatcher extension, which isn't expected to be done until like 2040, was not going to be the primary access to this project, and that you were looking at primary access on Lula and Coleman rather than adding a road which would go right through my house as it's currently planned and would shut down Hillview Lane some 15 years earlier than would otherwise be necessary if Mac Hatcher ever comes through. So what you're saying is your project is going to accelerate the development of the ground level roads immediately that would otherwise not happen until Mac Hatcher comes through. Is that, do I understand what you're saying correctly?
We are pursuing a road connection to Coleman Road. We are pursuing a connection to Lulu Lane. We have not done a full traffic study yet. We are anticipating that the City of Franklin Engineering Department will want a connection here in some way. I don't have all the details on that yet, and that has not been fully vetted. But we are anticipating that there's going to be a conversation about the extension of this road to Hillview Lane. Hillview Lane would not be closed off and it would not become a greenway trail until Mac Hatcher is constructed.
So that's not what you told us at the prior meetings, and I feel like I've been
This is
misled.
Adam Polish talking now, and I want to reiterate what we said in previous public meetings. We do not have any intention of leading with this roadway project.
Right.
As we've discussed previously, we are intending on leading with roadway connections to roads that we believe are more adequate to handle potential traffic, which does not include the current state of Hillview Lane. So again, the roadways that Greg was showing in yellow were maps that were provided by the City of Franklin based on their TDOT Mac Hatcher plans. And we understand that there are numerous hurdles, your property being one of them, that would prohibit a roadway going through there at that time. So nothing has changed. And I picked up on Greg's comment earlier. I think he slightly misspoke in the conversation when he was showing these areas. We do not intend to try to lead with a road in that area, and I will reiterate that again.
Greg,
Hey, Emily.
can I come in?
You sure can.
Okay. Emily McGidd here on Hillview Lane. Is it possible then just to take Hillview Lane out of the process, period? Why is it even in there? Because if you're going to put all that commercial in there, that's going to invite more traffic and more population. Can you just not do Hillview Lane? Can you just cut it out if you're not going to use it?
Adam, I think that's an interesting
Oh,
conversation.
do I
to
get
have
it?
with you.
Could we-
I think it's Adam Bellish again, Will. I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
There are roadways around a totally unrelated project to this called Berry Farms that we're involved with. There are roadways adjacent to Berry Farms. There's an example of one called Pratt Lane that is on the south side of the project near Dave Ramsey's headquarters. That roadway was adjacent to a project. It was an existing public roadway. When Dave Ramsey's facility was constructed, the City of Franklin had that roadway connection gated off so that the users of Dave Ramsey's and Berry Farms project did not access that roadway. That was something that was established during the development plan and site plan stages.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that we would entertain conversations on. Again, the conversation tonight is about land use policy, not about the development plan or infrastructure. And I think those are both great questions that you and Rob asked with regard to how do we continue to preserve Hillview Lane and keep it in a fashion that is commensurate with some of the neighbors' desires, even though it is a public road that's partially maintained by the city and the county.
This is Danny and Renee Chapman. Can you guys hear us?
Yes.
Okay, our question is just the opposite side of the land because we're on Lula Lane.
Okay.
So, okay, is there any, you are going, if you can't go in and out Hillview Lane, are you planning then on going in and out of Lula Lane?
I think, ma'am, the similar conversation applies, and Franklin will have requirements. If this development were to be approved at all in the future, there are significant infrastructure upgrades that will be needed both from a roadway, and water and sewer conversation. Right now, this is unfortunately a conversation that is meant to talk about land use policy and not our development plan. But we would understand based on city requirements of where those roadway connections may have to go. There is a current right-of-way extension that takes that is the old Hillview Lane right-of-way that connects Incinerator Road to this property. That's shown, Greg, if you can kind of highlight that. The dash that kind of comes due north out of the property that goes up to Incinerator but does not come out on Lula. So ma'am, those were all conversations that we would need to be coordinating with the city. And obviously if those connections were made, I would believe, I can't speak for the city, but I would believe that they would be looking for those roadways to be upgraded and not just continue to exist as they are today.
Okay, but am I correct? But we're not in the city. We're in the county.
Correct.
So are you going to this? Are you going so that we would be then adopted into the city? Is that what you would go for this?
No. Only property owners who request annexation into the city can be annexed. So if you're not requesting annexation into the city, you won't be annexed into the city of Franklin.
Okay.
Okay, so
roadway improvements required by the city could be county roads. It's our preference that the main entrance be off of the Coleman Road access here to the south.
that's where you're actually planning the entrance then, is more at Coleman Road. Let's make sure you're saying that correctly.
That's one of the goals of our master plan. Any other questions? Jody, do you have a question?
Yeah, because seems like one of the biggest concerns is going to be the access. I mean, that's just beautiful development, all that. We'll deal with all that later, but when I look at that, I mean, because the people on Lulu Lane are going to kind of feel like we do. I will say Incinerator Road seems to be not a bad idea, and
Yes.
the land coming from Coleman Road, if you can acquire that from people,
Ideal.
it does seem like the ideal thing. Because the one thing about Hillview Lane, I mean, there's only one tree covered lane in the city of Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
It's attached to the national, because all the property that we're on, the county people up to Harlin's and us, is part of a national battlefield. And we have national status because all this land, even though they build on all of it, we're still kind of a national battlefield. Winstead Hill is the main thing. And the goal is to keep, and I mean, I thought Franklin was always in on the same thing, 28 years ago, that, preserving RN as, one of those gateways into the city. And I mean, it's one of the most, I mean, our road is like, if anybody's ever drove up our road, it's like one of the most beautiful roads there is.
Mm-hmm.
Seasonal, everything. So, and the Coleman Road, I know those people probably might not want a road through there, but some people sell. So really my big concern right now is, and then that little cut through road over there don't seem really fair to all those green people over there in the shadow green. And I mean, who's going to want to go in and out of that light industrial development down there? Because it is going to really affect Jimbo Good Pasture, and it's going to affect Rob and Dotson. I mean, it's just going to devastate them. And,
I think Emily brings up a good point, and it's worth having that conversation with the city for sure.
Yeah, and that's if y'all getting that relief off of us, because even Lulu Lane I don't think is such a great thing for the people that live, because it's a nice little community over there. It's been hidden away for a really long time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the only green spaces close to Franklin too as well. We're all green through here. So when South Hall came in with the new inn and development.
Mhm.
You know, we're one of the only green spaces up through here also. And that's how we really would prefer to keep it. That's why we were asking specifically, you need to give us more direct where that entrance is gonna be or exit entrance is gonna be. That's what I think the issue for everybody along ours would be.
Okay.
And on that August 22nd meeting, is that only for the city?
Well,
And
how many entrances do you have to have? Do you
That's a-
have to have two entrances?
That's a good question.
Two, there are several ways we could approach that regarding emergency connections, but two entrances I think would be the minimum.
no, we'll
Okay.
we'll let
And
you
I'm a
I mean,
little,
is that what the city calls for?
The city would like to see roads stubbed out north, south, east, and west. But they do give us some design discretion as far as that goes. But when a public roadway is stubbed to a property, they do want it connected. But I think that y'all are bringing up some good suggestions that I think are worth pursuing. That's why we have the neighborhood meetings first before we start the process with the city of Franklin, because it allows us to hear from the community and ask these questions as we move forward.
yeah, because it seems like this is just a mini West Haven. That's what I'm getting from the impression of what you gave us today. Am
It's a
I
small
wrong on
village.
that?
It's a small village, yes.
Greg, does the development, will it require or necessitate the annexation or change of land use for anybody on Hillview Lane? Is there any reason that would have to happen?
No, the only way that you annex into the city of Franklin is if the property owner requests it.
But nothing you're doing is going to force us to have to do that, if I understand correctly.
Not that I'm aware of, no,
And Lula Lane also?
that's correct.
is there, you said something about that sewer thing over there on Lulu Lane. Is there actually sewer over there or is it just a?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask about too. There's not sewer over there.
Yeah, the sewer gravity manhole is right here in Shadow Green. If you can see my big blue dot.
Oh, your hole. Okay.
In some way, we need a force main to go from a pump station here across country to get to that. I know I just drew that through your house there, Emily, but that's not what I'm
Well,
trying
we
to
went
describe.
through part of our property too.
Well, it has to go from that pump station to this to a manhole over here. The exact route location of that is yet to be determined. It can be under the road. There are a number of places we could put it.
Greg, if I could, this is Adam again, if I could just intervene with a
Sure.
comment.
A pump
The
station.
city has requested, if this were to move forward, that the pump station be at the bottom of their urban growth boundary drainage basin, which is where we have it drawn now. That does not mean that that needs to be on property that we don't control. So
Right.
if for instance, the force main stops at our western boundary for now, that is something that the city of Franklin may entertain. The city of Franklin would like to capture Lula Lane from a sewer standpoint, because as we've been told by the Water and Sewer Department, that a lot of the homes up on Incinerator and Lula are on failing septics and are on pump and haul. And would be something that the city would look to in the future, not from an annexation standpoint, but to be able to provide city sewer to folks that have failing septic. That
Sure.
has nothing to do with our project, but is just
Health and safety.
there's
Okay, but
another-
how does the city do that when we're in the county? That's what I'm not understanding, unless we were to be annexed.
Correct. There is an option for a resident to request sewer availability from the city without being annexed. And so that would come at the landowner's request. The city would not mandate that. So if you
Okay.
are on a farm or have septic that works, there's no need for you to change your land use. If you live in a home further north that's in failing septic, it may be something that those landowners say, hey, you know what, we would love to not have to pump our sewage and haul it away. And the city is interested in entertaining that conversation for this drainage basin because of the environmental concerns of raw sewage being discharged into the creeks. But that has nothing to do with our project. That was conversations with how utilities could be provided to this area if this pump station is built in the future.
But sir, this all has to do with this. This all has to do with your property, because none of this would be being considered if it didn't have to do with your property. You
And my
need to
only
understand that. You need to understand that.
point, ma'am, is that if the sewer is not shown how it is in this drawing at Lula Lane, it would still be built along the creek and stop at the property corner where Greg has just drawn in blue. This was a comment that was provided by the City of Franklin Water and Sewer Department, so we were accommodating that on this document.
I understand now. Okay.
There's a question that was provided by someone online in the chat asking about connections to these roadways, both Coleman Road and Lula Lane. We would envision in preliminary conversations with the staff of the City of Franklin is that if these roadways are connected, there would have to be additional improvements to those roadways. So Coleman Road is a prime example. The area in green, that's kind of hard to see, but just off the map there, is a City of Franklin major thoroughfare roadway called a collector road that would necessitate upgrades as well. So again, we're not suggesting dumping traffic out onto roads that can't handle them. We would work with the city and the county to assess roadway capacity, and if there's needed upgrades for those roadways, those would need to be made at the cost of the project in the future.
Michelle had a question in chat. Is the sewer pump pipe crossing Polk Creek? I don't know that we have an exact location on the force main.
Right now, what is shown is a line that is entirely on the north. Again, this is just for discussion purposes as provided by the City of Franklin. This is not anything cut in stone with regard to does it cross the creek or how that alignment is finalized.
Right. Right now, we're just showing it north of the creek.
So this village thing you have, the 730 development, if you don't get this, if it doesn't go for y'all in the city, will y'all abandon this site or y'all look at another design on this property?
I think as I've mentioned to some folks previously, and as Greg mentioned to start the conversation, the land is currently zoned MGA 1 in the county, which is zoned for 1 unit per 1 acre for residential housing.
Yeah.
Does not require any open space set aside like what we think is this really unique land plan for the City of Franklin. We are really excited about this land for all the reasons that everybody that lives by it is excited. We think it's a wonderful area. We want to do something that's respectful to this part of Franklin and to the town and to the neighbors. We would have an interest in moving forward on this property, whether it's in the city or the county. I think our preference is the city due to the unique land plan and conservation opportunities that they afford, as well as the quality utilities and services that the city provides, like police, fire, water, sewer, trash. I think that has its advantages over county development, but it is zoned already in the county for 1 unit per 1 acre, and obviously there's some interest in that if we're not successful in moving forward with the city.
But it will be under the historic hillside zoning ordinance, won't it? Either
In
way.
the city, it's the hillside overlay protection. That's what the city's protection would be.
Yeah, because it looks like, hills. I mean, because I'm sitting on it, so I know.
Yeah.
Um,
There are a lot of protected areas over here in the city's plan. It's a little bit different in the county.
but when you become city, like when you get annexed in, you will go under that also, correct?
It would be under that, or those requirements would apply, yes.
Okay, good.
How about toward Lula Lane and the Polk Creek specifically? Because we had a species in that area that was, considered special. That the same way?
Yes, in the city, there are a lot of restricted protections on streams and creeks.
Mr. Gamble, I know who you are because we received the letter, but who's the other gentleman that keeps piping in? And we were late. Sorry, we couldn't get hooked up.
No problem. Adam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, my name is Adam Balish. I'm a partner and oversee development for a company called Boyle Investment Company that's here in Franklin. We've been in Franklin for about 25 years as a company. My family and I both we live here in Franklin, and our company is a large landowner and developer here in Franklin for other projects, like I mentioned earlier, Berry Farms and other things throughout Cool Springs here locally.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Greg, if the 70% is being put into a conservation easement, as you said was going to be done.
Rob, ask your question again. I lost you.
The 70% that's not going to be developed, is that going to be put into a conservation easement?
It can be either conservation easement, or it can be platted as open space to be maintained by a homeowners association. One of the two.
What is it? What is the plan?
So yeah, different open space areas are going to be handled in different ways. If there's a horse pasture, we don't want the HOA to have the insurance liability of keeping a horse. It would be in a conservation easement. If it is a hiking trail that we know that the HOA is going to be maintaining, then it would be a part of the open space and in the HOA's purview to maintain. If it is a so just different uses of that open space may require a different either conservation easement or HOA open space protection.
And Rob, just to clarify one point there, regardless of the ownership, whether it was in an HOA or privately held with a conservation easement, the city of Franklin would have similar development restrictions of that property. So if the POA owns some open space, it's not like that could be sold and redeveloped in the future. There would be development and construction restrictions against that space. So it wouldn't be held in a typical conservation easement like the Land Trust of Tennessee might hold something, but it could have similar development construction restrictions based on the zoning ordinance and what you can and can't do in those spaces. So hopefully that also helps clarify kind of the intent of those areas long term.
You know, Adam, I appreciate that. But as we see here, zoning ordinances are subject to change. So any property that's not put into some sort of permanent conservation easement would be subject to development if the zoning ordinances are changed like you're asking them to do here, I think, unless there's something I'm missing.
Yes and no. We would be, this development process, if it goes forward, and that's several steps down the road, and we'd obviously have public meetings for that as well. But we would create a, what's called a planned unit development, a PUD. And so that would be the zoning for this property. It would be governed by the zoning ordinance at the time of the creation of the PUD. So if the zoning ordinance changes in the future, you would still be restricted by what's in the PUD from a zoning document, if that makes sense. So
it does, but I think we're talking in circles now. I mean, you'd still be able to amend the PUD and build more on there if you could get that amended. It's not, there's nothing permanent about it, and it's subject to being changed in the future at the desire of the people who control the PUD.
Yeah, I think we don't have any issue with working with the city to permanently restrict the 70 acres. I think Greg's point is we need to just figure out the ownership of those areas. But that's something that we can discuss with you all as local neighbors or as part of the public process if we're able to proceed with this conversation. I don't think we have any issue with trying not to do that. It's just what is the mechanism to make those protections permanent?
Right.
Adam, this is Emily again. Just another question. Is there any consideration of confining this whole property? Like you're saying, you're gonna have walking trails. Well, they can just walk onto my property. Are you gonna have anything that's going to delineate between mine or anybody else's and your development?
So was that an invitation to come onto the property, Emily, or you off?
No, sir. Far from it.
I'm teasing. No, I believe in a lot of instances there are current, because it's an active cattle farm, I believe there are current fences around the perimeter of the property. We would want to make sure that there's, property boundaries are posted so that, if there are trails and open space that the city is trying to promote on our 70%, is that it's very clear and demarked where that starts and stops. So we would have no problem in working with neighbors to make sure that that is protected.
Hey, I have a quick question. This is Christina Garner. I just want to know, really, is there an actual need for this many more homes to even be built just in general? Because actually the population it's reduced in its growth the last couple of years. And I know the school enrollment has also gone down. So is there really a need for this massive influx of houses?
Good question.
Yes, Franklin has demand for new housing for sure. Franklin I know it may seem like it's a fast growing town. It's actually a pretty slow growing town. But yes, there is demand for new housing and a differentiation of housing types in Franklin for sure.
Well, they figured it is. I wouldn't spend millions of dollars on doing this,
Well, one thing I can just say, this is Jody Thompson again. However y'all go about this, please be kind to us.
Yeah, we'll include you early and often. For sure.
We've been through this before. We've fought in 3 battles. We won them all, and it's like we just want to be respected. Want our land to be respected because we're like guardians of this incredible place in Franklin. Nobody else really has this, and it's like in the back of Harlin's farm. I mean, but I'm look forward to hearing more and being included in. But just because I've been in Franklin for 34 years and we went through a growth. They did a 20-year growth in 10 years, easy, and they used to just ram it down our throats. But we do have good aldermen, we do have good planning commissioners, and you do see that our neighborhood really cares. And we now know that we have neighbors on the other side over, and that's a long-term neighborhood over there. Been there a really long time, and it has a lot of history on itself.
Sure.
But just remember where you're at, and that we're humans, and we look forward to working with you.
Greg, what are the price points these y'all are proposing to build?
Adam, do you have any thoughts on that?
I wanted to ask this question about my catcher because I'm afraid we missed that part of what they were discussing.
Rob, did you ask about price points? I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, I think from a price point standpoint, we are proposing, it's very, very difficult to tell at the scale of some of these drawings, and these are very early and preliminary. We are proposing a larger lot, both in some of the village alley loaded product as well as the other single family product. We are proposing some larger lots and larger homes than what has typically been seen in Franklin over the last decade or two in newer developments. So based on today's cost structure of construction and the size of the homes and the market values and things like that, we are talking about preliminary prices of homes probably starting off north of $1 million for those homes. We are very, very early in the visioning of the project. And right now we're talking more about lot prices without full understanding of where home prices may be. We are not Boyle Investment Company is not a home building company. And so some of those are just some very, very early projections, but I would anticipate kind of homes starting at a little above $1 million, but probably going into the upper echelons in several $1 million and up for some of the larger homes. Sounded like there was another family or person that may have some other questions. Happy to answer those here in the last few minutes before our time's up. And I want to reiterate, somebody put on here if we could call them on the chat. Like if anybody has follow-up questions, even though the meeting's over here in a few minutes, we're more than happy to meet in person or to answer any questions via phone or email that may not have been addressed tonight.
So are we included in that August 22nd meeting as citizens with no questions? Or is that just for city people?
It is a presentation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Planning Commission. There are sometimes when, if you ask the mayor, he'll let you speak. It just depends on how long the agenda is for that evening.
I would just like to see.
It's not intended to be a public hearing, but
Yeah.
it is open to anybody who wants to sit in the room and watch and listen, yes.
Okay, because it's kind
At
of
City Hall in the boardroom.
the big picture, the
Yeah.
big posters and stuff. This has been nice. This has been very informative. I'll give you that. Well, I'll shut up.
Any
now.
final questions? We've got about one more minute.
Could we ask a question, please?
Sure.
One last, I think we may have missed part of this, but how do you know, or do you guys know foresee about the Mac Hatcher extension? Because
This
I mean, we
blue
figure
dotted
you guys
line-
have some insight from them of when this is going to happen.
This blue dotted line right here is the future route of Mac Hatcher Parkway, according to the state of Tennessee.
Right.
There's no plan right now to construct Mac Hatcher or build this portion. I mean, it's to be built in the future, but we just don't, there's no plan in place or funding in place or anything like that to do that. So I don't know when it would happen.
Okay, thank you. And what were the other dates that we missed the dates? We got in right as you said them. What were the dates for?
Okay, we're planning to file this application with the city of Franklin on August the 12th. We're planning to present to the board, mayor and aldermen and the planning commission at the joint workshop on August the 22nd. That's normally at 5, but it could start at 4:30. So you'll have to watch the website to see what time they start that meeting. And then we would be on track for the planning commission meeting on September the 26th at 7 p.m.
Thank you very much.
Sure. All right, we're going to log off. As Adam said, if there are any other questions, y'all should have my contact information in the letter that was sent out. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have an unanswered question.
One last point of clarification for anybody that may have shown up late and missed it. The planning commission process that Greg is talking about now is for a update to Envision Franklin. It is not for our development plan or for utilities or for connections or anything of that nature. That will come at some time in the future, and that this is a land use policy vote by planning commission now. So just to clarify that point. Thanks, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.